Welcome to Khanversations. I'm Muqtedar Khan, your host. And in this conversation, I'm going to talk to you about a phenomenon that is out there on a small scale. Some people have taken notice of it, but it is not being recognized or observed as much as it deserves to be recognized and observed. And that phenomena is about some Muslim countries, especially small, tiny Muslim countries, playing a major role in in geopolitics and diplomacy, and in public diplomacy, especially as peacemakers and mediators. So I'm going to identify a few cases in the past 5 years and highlight the role of Muslim countries in trying to broker peace or mediate between prominent players like India and Pakistan, Russia and Ukraine, Israel and Hamas, Turkey and Egypt, and so on. But before that, please subscribe to Khanversations, like this video, press the bell icon so that you get notifications about future posts, and also make sure that you share this video with your social network. So let's begin. So I'll start first with Qatar, which has been recognized as punching way above its weight, a tiny little country with a very small population, but lots of oil wealth, often involved in major diplomacy and a big player on the world scene. So Qatar has been instrumental in essentially mediating between Hamas and Israel, the United States, and the Palestinians, especially during the current conflict. And so most of the ceasefire-related issues were discussed and mediated through through Qatar. And Qatar also hosts Hamas leaders in Doha. So that is apparent. This tiny little country was playing a much bigger role than major powers like Turkey or Saudi Arabia or even Iran in this process. While the Israelis have tried their best to push Egypt into the most prominent position for mediation with Hamas, they argue that Egypt has much better relations with Hamas. Egypt had already warned Israel 3 days before October 7th that there was an attack that Hamas was planning on Israel, which the Israelis ignored. But nevertheless, Qatar remains a major player. Lots of people often misunderstand Qatar's position, especially that it is hosting the leaders of Hamas. They are not hosting them because they have some kind of an ideological alignment with Hamas leaders, but apparently they are doing that as a favor or as well at the behest of the United States of America. So it allows the world to essentially have somebody who can talk to Hamas, especially since the US and European Union have declared Hamas as a terrorist organization. So they are unwilling to have direct talks with Hamas. So you need to have a mediator. So Qatar has played an important role and is playing an important role in the ongoing conflict. Negotiations between the United States and the Taliban during the Trump administration were all held in Doha, and Qatar played a huge role in bringing these two players together. Qatar also played an important role in basically bringing Egypt and Turkey together, especially during the World Cup soccer. And you can see this photograph of Erdogan and Sisi just shaking hands. And you can see that happening in Qatar during the World Cup. So Qatar has essentially, you could argue, played an important role in mediation, in trying to broker peace. Egypt and Turkey had not had diplomatic relations since 2015. Most of the conversation between the two countries was often quite undiplomatic, and Turkey was scathing in its criticism of Egypt for the manner in which it had treated the Muslim Brotherhood. And most of the Muslim Brotherhood had moved to Turkey, their media stations, their television, satellite stations, etc. They were operating out of Turkey, and then Turkey and Egypt essentially had no diplomatic relations and were quite hostile to each other. But thanks to some of the efforts from Qatar, but also Turkish recognition that in order to remain a player in the Arab world, it cannot continue to have bad relations with the Sunni Arab world because Egypt was supported by both Saudi Arabia and UAE in its dealings with the Muslim Brotherhood. So the alignment was each UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt, Turkey, and the Muslim Brotherhood. So essentially, Turkey was being isolated from the Arab conversations. But Qatar brought Turkey back into the midst of the Arab conversation. So you can see that Qatar has played an important role. Even tiny United Arab Emirates has played an important role and seeks to play an important role in the international arena. It is one of the biggest supporters of bringing India into the UN Security Council. United Arab Emirates is also part of the I2U2 partnership between US, Israel, UAE, and India. It is, I think, the second biggest, a third biggest trading partner now with India. And so the UAE is an important country, and in the past 2-3 years, it has played a role in essentially brokering a ceasefire between India and Pakistan. India's National Security Advisor, Ajit Doval, and the head of ICI, General Hamid, or the former general, I don't know. Yeah, the former general director of ISI, had actually met in UAE. And so UAE has also volunteered to mediate further conflictual issues between India and Pakistan. But the ceasefire is more or less holding on the border between India and Pakistan now for a while. There are occasional flare-ups, etc., but not like they used to be before 2017. And so in that sense, that is a success for the efforts made by UAE and in this matter. I mean, there's no doubt that the initiation was originally from India, and it was the leadership of India's National Security Advisor, Ajit Doval, which led to that conversation and subsequent ceasefire. But the mediator was United Arab Emirates. And then, of course, we all know the role UAE has played in the formation, the progress, the development, and sustenance of the Abrahamic Accords. When the UAE initiated this process, there was a lot of criticism of UAE, and nevertheless, UAE has been successful until October 7, you could say, in trying to normalize relations between the Israel and the rest of the Arab world. And there were 4 countries which had already signed up. The Abrahamic Accords technically are still in place. None of the countries have formally withdrawn from it. And it is quite possible that after whatever happens between Israel and Gaza, I think you will see some activity, some efforts to resuscitate that. And if Joe Biden wins the election in November, then of course you can assume that he's going to be basically the servant of Israel, and he will try his best to advance Israeli interests in the Middle East and its region. And one of the ways in which he will be doing that is basically pushing the Abrahamic Accords, trying to expand them, etc. So UAE is also a tiny little country which has been punching above its weight, far above its weight in the diplomatic arena. One of the reasons for this, perhaps, is because these countries have a lot of wealth, and they're trying to improve their image, and they're trying to enhance their soft power. So if you go and look at the soft power index, you will find that both UAE and Qatar are ranked pretty high. And so essentially they have succeeded in promoting their brand in the international arena. And so that's one of the reasons why these countries have become important, and partly because they're also not democracies. They are finding international legitimacy by becoming important diplomatic players, besides also being very rich and therefore being able to do things like host soccer World Cups, etc. Another tiny country from the Muslim world, Oman, has played a lot of important has played an important role in several negotiations and successful, shall we say, rapprochements in the Middle East. And it is sad that that country's contributions are not recognized. Let me give you two examples. Oman was instrumental in bringing about the ceasefire between Saudi Arabia and Yemen. And it was a very slow process. It took several years of deliberations, and Omanis even hosted some of the meetings between the Saudis and the Houthis. And eventually, we after about 8 years of fighting, a ceasefire came about, and it is still holding. So Oman played an important role in that process. Another arena in which Oman has played an important role is in the rapprochement between Iran and Saudi Arabia. So while China has taken credit in claiming that it brought about the restoration of diplomatic relations between Saudi Arabia and Iran, they had a huge meeting and they had a Beijing declaration with that regards, and they even had a subsequent 6-month meeting at the foreign ministers level more recently. So China is not only taking credit for bringing this about, but also trying to maintain it. But initially and really the hard work was done by Iraq and Oman. And it took several years, nearly since 2021 onwards. There were secret dialogues and meetings between Saudis and Iranians directly in Iraq, and Oman also played an important role in that. So that leads us to our fourth country, which is Iraq, and Iraq has played an important role in the Saudi and Iranian rapprochement and return to diplomatic relationship. And the last example that I want to give is that of Turkey. Turkey is an interesting country. It's like Istanbul. It is the only city which is in two continents. I remember one day I gave a talk at the Marmara University's theology department, the Ilahiyat department in the Asian side in Üsküdar. And then I went to the European side in the evening and spoke at the Middle East Studies Center in Istanbul of Marmara. For me, that was an interesting day because that was a day in which I gave two talks in two different continents on the same day. So Turkey is like Istanbul in the sense it wants to be part of the West and part of the East. So it is part of NATO, a very important ally of the United States and Europe, especially during the Cold War. I mean, the US nuclear weapons were stationed in Turkey, and some of them are still there. And Turkey also now wants to be part of the Arab world and Asian resurgence and the Eurasian resurgence. So basically, it also is trying to pursue the multi-alignment policy. So it's aligned with the West. It's also aligned with Russia. It's also buying weapons from the West, also buying weapons from Russia. And it is also involved very, shall we say, intimately in the politics of the former Ottoman Empire, including the Arab world. So Turkey, at the beginning of the Russia-Ukraine war, continued to help Ukraine, supplying weapons to Ukraine. And so Turkey continued to help Ukraine by supplying weapons. In fact, in the beginning of the war, when Russia was trying to actually send ground forces towards Kiev, Turkish supplied drones played havoc with the Russian army. And so Turkey was playing the role that a good NATO country ought to play. And then Turkey also continued to engage with Russia and was key to essentially negotiating the Black Sea grain deal, by which both Ukrainian and Russian grain could be sent to the rest of the world. One of the crises that the Russia-Ukraine war created is that I think nearly a quarter or 25 to 30% of all essentially grain comes from Russia and Ukraine. And this war was basically raising the cost of food and enhancing food insecurity in the global south. And so that the agreement that Turkey was able to bring about between Russia and Ukraine was critical for 1 year to bring about essentially supplies of grain to the rest of the world, especially Africa, and thereby reducing the cost of basically arresting the rise of inflation, which was just happening at a very rapid pace as a result of that war. So what we see right now is that there are countries in the Muslim world who are stepping up to mediate, and who are also stepping up to bring about some kind of peace, and also mending relationships which have been broken, such as the one between Egypt and Turkey, between Iran and Saudi Arabia. These are critical relationships. They contribute to stability in the Middle East, and they also contribute to containing the arms and proxies race in the region, where each player is trying to enhance his proxies and increase his proxies, and then causing destabilization in other countries. So these restoration of agreements and normal relations between these countries, especially Saudi Arabia and Iran, Egypt and Turkey, are very critical, and tiny countries like Oman and Qatar have played an important role in that. But it also points to a structural phenomenon. People are talking increasingly about the decline of the United States, and also the weakening of the international liberal order. And part of it is because of the peculiar foreign policy that the United States has been pursuing. First, it was America first, which means a rejection of internationalism and enhancement of isolationism geopolitically, and protectionism from a trade perspective that Donald Trump was pursuing. And then Joe Biden comes, and with his profoundly hypocritical foreign policy, where he talked about democracy promotion and human rights. And other than supporting Ukraine and Israel, his foreign policy is limited to nothing else, no other achievement in the past 3.5 years. And on the contrary, the United States is more on the side of enhancing conflicts. So, for example, the US has repeatedly voted against ceasefire. If the US had not blocked the ceasefire resolution, who knows, we would have already had the ceasefire there. So the US is critical for the continuation of that particular conflict between Hamas and Gaza. And then with regards to Russia and Ukraine, it's nearly 2 years now, and you cannot point to me a single initiative that the United States has advanced in order to broker some kind of peace or ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine. The United States is trying to use Ukraine to essentially reduce Russia's military strength, to basically undermine its economy and basically eliminate Russia as a global power. And so the US appears to be more interested. I mean, this is my country, and I voted for Joe Biden, but I completely disagree with his foreign policy approach. Rather than being people who bring peace to the world, we have unfortunately become a country that not only sells weapons, promotes conflicts, perpetuates conflicts, also profits from those conflicts. We have made a lot of money. The private sector in the United States, the military-industrial complex, it's profiteering like nothing because of the Russia-Ukraine war. But not only the US, but look at China, the so-called number two in the international system. Other than taking credit for the hard work that Oman and Iraq did in order to bring Iran and Saudi Arabia to the diplomatic table, what else has China done in terms of trying to bring about peace anywhere in the world? They have talked to to the Taliban and to Pakistan. I mean, these are two countries in which they do have significant influence, but they have not been able to resolve. So I see very little effort from China in brokering peace. They did advance a 10-point peace plan for Russia and Ukraine, but I think that was more for it to be able to say, look, we are interested in promoting peace, and then they can continue to buy stuff from Russia and sell stuff to Russia. So in order to not look as if they completely aligned with Russia, they did promote a plan, but nothing really happened. Ukraine rejected it outright, and then that's it. No other steps were taken by Russia, even though Russia is one of the, by China, even though China is one of the biggest trading partners and one of the biggest investors in Ukraine, it has not used its influence inside Ukraine in any way to bring about some kind of an understanding. So in the absence of big players from the arena of peacemaking, it is, I think, admirable that these small Muslim countries have taken steps forward to negotiate, to mediate, to bring about peace, ceasefire, restore diplomatic relations between important countries in the world. And therefore, yes, while there is a democracy deficit in the region, and while they are unable to act collectively, and they themselves are not, while they may be economically well off, some of these countries, they are not militarily powerful or and do not enjoy the kind of strategic autonomy they would need to in their foreign policies to be able to resist what the US is doing in the Middle East. But nevertheless, I think that they have done an admirable job in this matter as playing the role of peacemakers and mediators, and it needs to be recognized and encouraged. 25% of the countries in the world are Muslim countries. 25% nearly population of the world is Muslim, and if Muslim countries take leadership role in advancing peace, making peace, becoming mediators, even if their influence and their efforts are restricted to 1/4 of the world, I think it's a good thing for both world peace as well as for human security and international security. So I hope you found this discussion interesting. So please subscribe to Khanversations, like the video, press the bell icon. Don't forget to share it with your friends and your social network. I'm your host, Muqtedar Khan. Until next time, take care.